Today, we're going to talk about one of the most important addendums that you will encounter in a Pennsylvania real estate transaction, and this is the Appraisal Contingency Addendum to the Agreement of Sale. Whether you're representing a buyer or a seller, understanding this document inside and out is absolutely critical to protecting your clients and keeping your transaction on track. So let's break it down all together step by step. What is an Appraisal Contingency Addendum? It's a legally binding addendum that is attached to the agreement of sale. Its primary purpose is to protect the buyer in the event that the property appraises for less than the agreed upon purchase price. So here's the concept. When a buyer is obtaining a mortgage, the lender will order an independent appraisal of the property to determine its fair market value. The lender will only loan money based on the appraised value, not necessarily the purchase price. So if the home appraises below the purchase price, there is a gap that has to be addressed. And that is exactly what this addendum is designed to handle. So why is this addendum so important? Let's say your buyer agrees to purchase a home for $350,000. The lender orders an appraisal and the appraiser determines the home is only worth $335,000. That creates a $15,000 appraisal gap. Now here is the problem. The lender will only lend based on the $335,000 appraised value. So your buyer has a few options depending on what was negotiated in this addendum. They could pay the difference out of pocket and proceed with the purchase. They can renegotiate the purchase price with the seller, or they can walk away from the transaction and get their earnest money deposit back. Without this addendum clearly spelling out the buyer's rights and options, a low appraisal can create enormous confusion, conflict, and even legal disputes between the parties. Now, before we walk through the addendum line by line, let's make sure that you're familiar with some of the key terms that you will encounter in this addendum. 1. Appraised value. By definition, this is the fair market value of property as determined by a licensed independent appraiser hired by the lender. Purchase price is the agreed upon price that the buyer is paying for the property as stated in the agreement of sale. An appraisal gap. This is the difference between the purchase price and the appraised value when the appraised value comes in lower. Appraisal contingency. This is a clause that gives the buyer the right to renegotiate or exit the transaction without penalty if the property does not appraise at or above the purchase price. Now let's walk through the actual addendum section by section so you know exactly what each part means and how to explain it to your clients. Just like most Pennsylvania real estate documents, this addendum starts with the basic transaction details. One is going to be the property address. This is the full address of the property being purchased. The seller's information. This is exactly as it's going to appear on the agreement sale. And the buyer's information, exactly as it appears in the agreement of sale. We have three options below in the appraisal contingency. Option A is the full appraisal contingency. This option gives the buyer the strongest level of protection. If the property appraises for less than the purchase price, the buyer has the right to notify the seller in writing within the agreed upon time frame, request a reduction in the purchase price to match the appraised value, or terminate the agreement of sale and receive a full refund of their earnest money deposit. Option B, the buyer here agrees to pay the appraisal gap up to a specified amount. This option is a middle ground that is very common in competitive markets. The buyer agrees in advance to cover the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price, but only up to a maximum dollar amount that is specified in the addendum. So for example, the buyer might agree to cover an appraisal gap of up to $10,000 out of pocket. If the gap exceeds the amount, that the buyer then has the right to renegotiate or terminate the agreement. This option makes the buyer's offer more competitive in a multiple offer situation, while still giving them some protection if the appraisal comes in significantly below the purchase price. And option C allows the buyer to put in an actual dollar amount that the property needs to appraise at. Section 2 outlines the contingency period. It allows for If not altered on the form, allows 30 days from the execution date of the agreement. So within this contingency period, the buyer may obtain an appraisal of the property from a Pennsylvania certified appraiser. Gives three options. If the buyer is obtaining financing, the appraiser shall be selected by the lender to whom buyer has made application for financing. B, if buyer is not obtaining financing, the appraiser shall be selected by the buyer because they're paying for it. And C, seller will provide access to the property to appraiser who is selected. So this allows a deadline or a timeline to allow for the appraisal to come in and get negotiated. Section 3 talks about if the minimum appraised value from paragraph 1 is met, or if the appraisal is not completed within that contingency period, the buyer will then accept the property at the purchase price and further agrees to complete settlement at the purchase price by any of the following or a combination thereof at the buyer's sole discretion. A, provide additional funds at settlement. B, adjust the loan amount stated in the mortgage or financing contingency paragraph of the agreement of sale. Or C, adjust the loan to value ratio in the agreement of sale. The buyer's election of any option above shall prevail over like terms of the mortgage or financing contingency paragraph of the agreement of sale. All other terms remain unchanged. Any fees that result from a change in loan terms will be the sole responsibility of the buyer. In part 4, if the minimum appraisal value is not met, the buyer will deliver a copy of the appraisal report to the seller. Then the buyer will, within the contingency period, terminate the agreement of sale by written notice to the seller, with all of the earnest money deposits being returned to the buyer. Or B, if the buyer does not terminate the agreement of sale or enter into a mutually acceptable agreement with the seller within the contingency period, then the buyer will waive the contingency. So it outlines and highlights all of the main components to the appraisal. So when representing the buyer, your primary goal is to make sure that your buyer is fully protected. So this is why providing this addendum is so important. That is a complete breakdown of the Pennsylvania Appraisal Contingency Addendum to the Agreement of Sale. The agents who handle appraisal issues with confidence and professionalism, again, are the ones who build the strongest reputations in this business. So now you know, and you have everything you need to do to help your buyer. As always, I'm here if you have any questions or want to walk through a practice scenario together. Again, let's go out there and protect our clients and close some deals.